Our study this morning has to do with the 23rd chapter of Isaiah. The subject there is Tyre and Sidon. Tyre and Sidon had a interesting relationship with the nation of Israel. Might be good as we study about Tyre and Sidon, the burden in the first verse of the 23rd chapter, the burden of Tyre. How ye ships of Tarshish, for it is laid waste so that there is no house, no entering in. From the land of Chittim it is revealed to them. Might be good to, as we look at what the prophet said about the future of Tyre, to think about the geography and the history of Tyre and Sidon, particularly as that history relates to the Jewish nation. What do we know about Tyre and Sidon? Jesus referred to Tyre and Sidon in the in his preaching. In fact, Jesus visited that region. In fact, there was a Phoenician woman who lived in that particular area that came to Jesus to be healed. So to maybe get a better grasp of what the prophet is saying about Tyre and Sidon, we might want to look at the relationship over time between the nation of Israel and Tyre. First of all, this Tyre and Sidon, geographically, where is it located with regard to Jerusalem? Where is it located? It's certainly on the north, toward the Mediterranean, and off to, as we look at the map, off to the right, so it'll be northwest. Tyre was a kind of an island country out in the Mediterranean, a few hundred yards. Sidon was about 20 miles or so inland. And that whole, let's say, Phoenician area, when Tyre and Sidon kind of went together, it was kind of Sidon was a powerful city-state, and they had colonies in various parts of the world. Being by the seacoast, it would be a commercial center, right? It would be maybe the twin towers of that ancient world. Center of commerce. Obviously fishing was a big industry there, with regard to being on the Mediterranean. Sidon was the son of Canaan. Going back, and his son established Sidon. Where does Tyre and Sidon connect first with Israel? Thinking back of our history, thinking back of our knowledge of the Old Testament. Where was at least? Where are some of the interactions between Tyre and Jerusalem?
Is it back with King David?
Okay, now that's one. In fact, Hiram, the king, brought cedars to David to build David's house. Herschel, you had your hand up.
Solomon
Okay. What would that area, that general area of Lebanon, Tyre, Sidon, the Phoenician area, known for the forestry industry, right? Cedars, you know. And so, not only David got cedars from the king of Tyre, but Solomon got cedars from that area for the temple. David got some for his own house. Solomon got it for the temple. So there was this commercial relationship between the nation of Israel and this area, this Phoenician area there on the seacoast. Where else do we have a connection then in the Old Testament between Tyre and Jerusalem, or Tyre and the government of Israel? What king of Israel took a wife from that area? Jezebel was from that area. And she brought bad news to Israel. She brought with her Baal worship. And what's she noted for, besides being just a rotten woman? Pardon me? Idolatry. And she set out to get rid of Judaism, right? She was getting rid of the prophets of the Jews, right? Elijah had trouble with Jezebel, right? He had, in fact, he went on one occasion when there was a famine in the land. Elijah went to that area, the Phoenician area, Tyre, Sidon, that area, and what great miracle happened at that particular event, at that particular time in history. He connected up with a widow, right? And this Phoenician woman fed him. And how did that happen? Fed Elijah the prophet. How did that happen? She had a son, and she had just enough meal for one more meal. Had enough meal for a meal, that's cornmeal or whatever for a meal. She was preparing that for her son, and Elijah said he wanted something to eat, right? And she said, "Well, I'm out of grub here." But her supply lasted for months and months, right? Miraculously.
Did Elijah raise her son, or killed her son, raise her son?
There was another widow. There was another family where there was the death of the son, and he raised. Yeah. So here's this. It's interesting that here's Elijah's going up into that area. This here connection there between the Jewish people and this Phoenician area. Well,
one of the reasons that when Israel went into the promised land, they were told to overthrow both those cities, and they didn't conquer either one of them, and it came back together.
Yeah. In fact, the tribe of Asher was assigned that particular area. And it was it was a great area. Absolutely, I mean, imagine the commercial activity that was going on in that area. And imagine this island. This island, Tyre, was kind of an island out in the Mediterranean, a few hundred yards off the shore, and a great area. Now, wonder why. I wonder why the tribe of Asher. See, those tribes of Israel were assigned geographic territories, and after the death of Joshua, they were assigned the responsibility to take those areas, to populate them, drive out the folks. Wonder why they didn't do that. I mean, this was choice landscape. This was choice real estate. Why wouldn't they make an effort to drive out the people there and take over that land? Well, they were lazy, but it was probably a formidable task. You know, here's yeah. But you know, they took the attitude of, they probably took the attitude of, well, that's pretty tough, and we don't want to get involved in anything that tough. Well then, so this area brought a lot of supplies to Jerusalem. What happened to this area during the time of the Assyrian, when the Assyrian government, when the Assyrian nation was really at its zenith in power? What happened? We're going to go to Jeremiah here in a little bit if we get the time, and talk about that further. But the Assyrians, tried to capture this area and weren't completely successful. Now, the Babylonians followed up and tried to capture this area and weren't completely successful. But then what world empire then did destroy Tyre and Sidon? Alexander the Great. Pardon me? Yeah, Alexander the Great, the Grecian Empire. And how was old Alexander the Great? You that know history here, how did old Alexander the Great take the possession of this island in the sea?
It was prophesied in Ezekiel 26, and it happened exactly how Ezekiel.
Pardon me?
It was prophesied in Ezekiel 26.
Okay.
Exactly that. He built a landmass out in the Burning Sea.
Yeah, this island nation was out there a few hundred yards from shore, and they were in a strategic location to beat off the enemy. But Alexander the Great got the idea of building a causeway. I guess that's what you call it, isn't it? Causeway, right out to the island, and that's how. Matthew, you had your hand up. Pardon me? Okay, he just filled it in. Filled in the sea to, it wasn't as if he didn't have the engineering capacity to build, pillars and build a bridge, but he filled it in and captured that area. Now, in the New Testament era, what relationship did the Jews have with that Phoenician area? Well, Yeah.
They had a friend named King Chamberlain and his wife who went to Herod to get, eventually they weren't able to sustain themselves.
Yeah.
But he was upset with Herod.
And then they built a relationship prior to old Herod being eaten by worms. Yeah. Well, in the New Testament period, Jesus said something about in Matthew 11. Well, in fact, let's turn to Matthew 11:21. Somebody read 3 or 4 verses there. Matthew 11:21.
Woe unto thee, Chorazin, woe unto thee, Bethsaida, for if the mighty works which were done to you had been done in Tyre and in Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. But I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon at the day of judgment than for you.
Okay, Jesus invokes Tyre and Sidon here, and I wonder what their great problem was. You see, Jesus said, you know, if I'd have been there, or if the great works that had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented. That was quite a contrast to what kind of response he was getting from some of the Jewish people, particularly the Sadducees, the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and those people. And he says, you know, if these things had been done there, those people would have repented. No, I wonder what their problem was. I wonder what their sin was. I wonder what their... Pardon me?
Pride.
Ah, where'd you get that, Herschel? You read it in the Psalms, and you read it in some of the other prophecies. Pride, that thing of pride just comes up again and again, you know. In Scripture as being something God just doesn't want to tolerate. So, but now let's look at some Scripture where Jesus went into the area of Tyre, into that Phoenician area. Luke. Well, let's go to Mark 3:8. Somebody look at Mark 3:8 and read that. Mark 3:8. Anybody? Mark 3:8.
And from Jerusalem and from Idumea and from beyond Jordan came they about Tyre and Sidon, a great multitude, when they had heard what great things he did, came unto him.
Yeah. Now, they see there was some, here at that point in history, there's some interest in spiritual matters. Now, let's read about, in Mark 7:24, beginning, Mark 7:24, about the Canaanite woman, the woman from that area, came to him, and let's read about Mark 7:24 to, let's say, the next 4 or 5 verses, Mark 7:24. Let's get that whole scenario there. Mark 7:24.
From there he arose and went to the region of Tyre and Sidon, and he entered a house and wanted no one to know it, but he could not be hidden. For a woman whose daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him, and she came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth, and kept asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. But Jesus said to her, Let the children be filled first, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs.
Another verse or two.
And she answered and said to him, Yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs under the table eat from the children's crumbs. And then he said to her, For this saying, go your way, the demon has gone out of your daughter. When she had come to her house, she found the demon gone, and her daughter lying in the bed.
That's interesting. That what you must King James Version says give to the dogs, and you're saying little dogs. What version were you reading from? This may not be relevant at all, but what happened to Jezebel, who came from that area? Pardon me? He was eaten by the dogs. Now, just there may not be any, that may not be of any particular significance, but it just seems interesting that, there was Jezebel came from that area, was eaten by the dogs. Yeah. But the fact that centuries later there was that expression used by Jesus about the dogs there. So there was this ongoing relationship between the nation of Israel and the Tyre, the Phoenician area, Tyre and Sidon, and that area. Let's look at a couple of prophecies outside of Isaiah. Let's look at Jeremiah 27. Jeremiah 27. The third verse beginning, and sent them to the king of Edom and the king of Moab, and to the king of the Ammonites and the king of Tyrus, king of Sidon, by the hand of the messengers which came to Jerusalem unto Zedekiah king of Judah. Now Zedekiah was king of Judah. He was one of the later kings. In fact, he was the last king, and commanded them to say unto the masters, Thus saith the Lord God of hosts, the God of Israel, Thus shall you say unto your masters, I have made the earth, the man and the beast that are upon the ground, by my great power, and have my outstretched arm, have given it to whom it seemeth suitable or meet to me. Now, here God is saying to these heads of nations, he's saying, it's me, God, that distributes power, that whereupon nations rise and fall. And now have I given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He's saying here, God's saying, I determine the bounds of nations and the time frame of nations. He says, now I have given all these lands to Nebuchadnezzar. So in Isaiah's prophecy, the judgment is pronounced against Tyre and Sidon. And here's a little more information about that. Specifically, that I've given these lands, not only Tyre and Sidon, but other lands, to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. My servant, and the beast of the field have I given him also. We might say he's given the whole shebang to him. And all the nations shall serve him, and his son, and his son's son, until the very time of the land of his land come. And then many nations and great kings shall serve themselves of him. And it shall come to pass that the nation and the kingdoms which will not serve the same Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, and that will not put their neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon, and the nation will I punish, saith the Lord, with the sword and with the famine and with pestilence until I have consumed them by his hand. God is saying, these nations are going to be destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. Therefore hearken not ye to your prophets, nor to your diviners, nor to your dreamers, nor to your enchanters, nor your sorcerers, which speak unto you, saying, ye shall not serve Babylon. And so there's a lot more there about God is giving specifics there. But let's go back now to the 23rd chapter of Isaiah with that background in mind. Verse we've already read verse 1, but we'll read that again. The burden or the judgment of Tyre, how ye ships of Tarshish, for it is laid waste, so that there is no house, no entering in on the land of Chittim. It is revealed to them. Now, Tarshish is probably in the area of Spain right now. By the way, Tyre and Sidon, where did you get to Lebanon when you went overseas? Did you look across at where Tyre and Sidon might have been, or probably were?
The road's still there. You can still, from Arabic, you can still see where Alexander built the causeway.
Yeah. Living proof that prophecies come. So Tyre and Sidon there are in that Lebanon area. 100 years ago, I went there and sat there by the sea with a group of people that sat by the sea there and looked out across there in a beautiful, still a beautiful area.
You can't explain how beautiful it is. It's really nice.
It was just kind of like, man, this is a good place to relax.
I'm just wondering, just side note, are the cedars, the forestry still intact?
I don't know.
Now, in the high mountains, there's still remnants, but it's pretty well all just palm trees now.
Yeah. So, I mean, over the years, the destruction, I suppose, and, just destroyed the area. So, this area but right now, beautiful area, but is it a center of commerce, Mark?
Well, it's because of the wars there. We can only go to the very edge of the border because Lebanon and Syria, they still hate each other. They're still fighting. And it's brutal over there. Really, nobody knows what's going on there because we don't even hear it, but it's really bad.
Yeah, but in terms of it being a commercial center of the world, I mean it's
Vacation spot for some people.
well, it's a vacation spot for some people, but in terms of most of the population, pretty depressed area. Well, the prophecies, and over time, we've seen how this plays out. In Jeremiah, it was said that that Nebuchadnezzar would be taking over that area, would be destroying that area, and then before that, the Assyrians were a problem for them, and then the Grecian Empire takes them over, and then by the time of Christ, it was kind of just an ordinary, laid-back community. But continuing on with the second verse of chapter 23, be still, ye inhabitants of the isle, thou whom the merchants of Zidon that pass over the sea have replenished or have satisfied. Now, with the downfall of Sidon, Tyre, this whole Phoenician area. With the downfall of that area, would that affect the colonies, scattered around? Would that affect the nations around about? Now, some of you guys that have lots of investments, and you know who you are, does what happens to the economy of the United States affect any other nation? Does the economy of China affect the United States economy? So the destruction of these nations, this Phoenician area, affected the whole world. Just like today. Harold, you check the stock market every day, right? I mean, what effect does the world economy, a nation, one nation's economy have on?
Oh, it's a direct relationship. If it's a bad day over in Europe, we're going to have a bad day the next day. It's just they look at us, their market funds at different times than what ours does. So we get a heads up, what happens over there, what's going to happen over here.
So in the Pacific Ring, the Asian area, the markets in Indonesia affect, and that shouldn't be news to us, right? Because that's what happened in the long ago here in terms of these commercial relationships. This is just an aside, but political relationships are one thing, commercial relationships are another thing, right? And sometimes political relationships get in the way of commercial relationships, and commercial relationships get in the way of political relationships. Why did someone want to ban forbid the teachers' union, the state retirement systems, ban them from investing in Iran? Wow, that's obvious, isn't it? Here there were people in the commercial world were making good money by investing in Iran. Politically, enemies, right? So that sort of thing isn't confined to today. That's been a matter that has played out, throughout the centuries. Well, be thou ashamed. Verse 3. I'm sorry, I missed verse 3 in chapter 23 of Isaiah. And by great waters, the seed of Sihar, the harvest of the river, is her revenue, and she is a mart of nation, a marketplace or a trading center. And that area, that harvest of the river, probably had some reference to the Nile River. But in verse 4, be thou ashamed, O Sidon, for the sea hath spoken, even the strength of the sea, saying, I travail not, nor bring forth children, neither do I nourish up young men, nor bring up virgins. The Tyre and Sidon were politically and commercially were such that they had colonies throughout the world, and I think this has, or the known world, and this has to do with what the verse is saying. I nourished up young men, nor I nourish up young men, nor bring up virgins. Verse 5, as at the report concerning Egypt, so shall they be sorely pained at the report of Tyre. Egypt is going to be affected, you see, with what's happening to Tyre, obviously. Pass ye over Tarshish. Now, Tarshish is probably the area of Spain today. How ye inhabitants of the isle? There's going to be, you know, this is an aside too, but if there's a Great Depression, if we have a Great Depression in this country, what's going to happen worldwide? I mean, in some of the, this is an aside, but some of the people that have studied the Great Depression of the 30s, 29, some of the people that have studied that have a notion that we in this country are headed for another Great Depression. And that would affect markets worldwide. Pass ye over to Tarshish, howl ye inhabitants of the isle. This is going to affect the whole region. This destruction, this burden that God has placed on this Phoenician area is going to affect the whole region. Who hath taken, verse 8, who hath taken this counsel against Tyre? Well, we can stop right there. Who has taken this counsel against Tyre? I mean, that's almost a rhetorical question, isn't it, at this point? Yeah. Who hath taken this counsel? The crowning city, whose merchants are princes. Why did, and this is just, it's hard for me to separate, you know, these predictions, these prophecies from that happened in that ancient world to things that are going on today. Why did they destroy what was the purpose of the that group over in the Middle East taking down the Twin Towers? What was the purpose there? I mean, what was the issue? I mean, that was a great symbol, right? It was our symbol of the power of capitalism. That was the symbol of our economic system. And the idea was to put the whole world in economic chaos, right? I mean, that's kind of was probably the thinking of those deranged people, but, you know, they were pretty clever in terms of that. But he says, who hath taken counsel against Tyre, the crowning city, whose merchants are princes, whose traffickers, traders, are the honorable of the earth. Well, what happens oftentimes to regions, cities, counties, states, or whatever? What happens when there's great prosperity? They get lazy, but they also get what?
In debt.
They get in debt, but what else?
Greed.
Arrogant. And, you know, I wish some of our leaders had quit talking about, how powerful we are, as a nation. I wish they just kind of toned that down a little bit. Because that's a sign of arrogance, right? And arrogance is not, it's not a good thing. God has condemned arrogance on every hand. So he gets into that in the next verse, verse 9. The Lord of hosts hath proposed it, to stain the pride of all glory, and to bring in contempt all the honorable of the earth. See, the pride's what's gotten them in trouble. So what you said there, the arrogance, pride. Verse 10, pass through thy land as a river. Rivers go through a land and they just flow. Old Man River just continues to flow. Well, that's as a token, as an allegory, pass through the land as a river. The troops, the armies, pass through this. The Nebuchadnezzar be passing through this land as a river. O daughter of Tarshish, there is no more strength. In verse 11, he stretcheth out his hand over the sea. He shook the kingdoms. The Lord hath given a commandment against the merchant city, to destroy the strongholds thereof. Talking about destroying that powerful, commercially driven land. Verse 12, and he said, Thou shalt no more rejoice, O thou oppressed virgin, daughter of Zion. Arise, pass over Chittim. There also shalt thou have no rest. Again, describing the destruction, the pain and the misery. In verse 13, behold the land of the Chaldeans. Now, who were the Chaldeans? The Babylonians. And Jeremiah talked about Nebuchadnezzar. Behold the land of the Chaldeans. This people was not till the Assyrians founded it. What kind of a nation was Babylon when the Assyrians were in power? The Assyrians put together Babylon, and then it's ironic that Babylon overtook the Assyrians. So, I guess the bell has sounded.